Story 1. This happened to a friend of mine and someone who I have worked with for over 20 years. Let's call him Scott. This story always gets a laugh out of our group, especially since he does voices and acts out what happened. In the late 1980s, Scott worked at a Burger King while still in high school. For the first few months, he always worked the late shift, and business was usually slow. The owners were a husband and wife team who, as you can imagine, came down hard all the time on the kids working. For the most part, Scott did not have to deal with them outside of them parking late at night with binoculars, as they spied on the late crew to make sure they did their job. Then summer hit. With summer vacation, Scott was moved to the lunch team. He was not used to how busy it was and was a bit overwhelmed. His main job was on the fryer. He took care of the fries, onion rings, and chicken sandwiches. The lunch crowd was really starting to build up that first day he was on the day crew, and the wife owner walks by Scott, looks over his shoulder, and in a very harsh voice tells him, "Put down more fries," which Scott does. A few minutes later, she walks by again, even more agitated, and screams, "Put down more fries, we don't have enough." Scott puts down more. A third time she comes by and grabs him by the arm and pulls him around. She got right up in his face and said, "Are you some kind of idiot? I said put more fries down now." So Scott did the only thing he knew how to do. He filled every fryer with as many fries as would fit and loaded every single row with as many fries as you could possibly put down. Soon the basket that held the finished fries was overflowing because he had so many. Well, the boss comes around, raises her hands in the air, and starts screaming, "You made too many darn fries," at which point Scott had enough. He picked up a mustard and ketchup bottle and squeezed them both right into her face and clothes, yelled, "I quit," and stormed out of there. He said he was shaking so badly driving home and was worried the police would show up, but they never did. Story 2. I'm not sure if this quite counts as malicious compliance, but I was just doing what they wanted me to, so I guess it fits. In the mid-2000s, I worked for a small printing company. Our commercial work was on large lithographic machines, but we still had office printers and a number of staff who knew a lot about them. I don't think a single one of our office printers had been purchased new or even working. The owner just bought lots of broken office printers for not a lot of money and then Frankensteined them into working ones. We didn't often buy printer paper because we just cut leftovers from the factory to suitable sizes for the office. Overall, our office printing costs were extremely low despite the fact that we printed tens of thousands of pages a year. I was a general office dog's buddy. Among my duties was fielding calls for the director. He would never take calls from cold callers, and I was allowed to describe myself as whatever job title they wanted to hear to deal with them. An office printing management service had got our number. They were offering a completely managed service where they loaned the machines, supplied the consumables, took care of everything, and you just paid per print. Great for some companies, expensive and unnecessary for us. When they first started ringing, I kept telling them, "Sorry, we aren't interested. Please remove us from your list," or, "We're a printing company. We don't need managed printing services. Please take us off your list." This must have gone on for months, and I was getting annoyed that they wouldn't take us off the call list. I started spending more time trying to explain to them why it was pointless and a waste of both our time to keep ringing. I explained the information above, but the caller was convinced he could save us money regardless of all that. I guaranteed him he couldn't, as I doubted we paid more than a penny a page. Naturally, he didn't believe me. As far as he was concerned, if I was answering the phone, I was the office junior no one important answers the phone, who had no idea how much printing actually cost, and just too stubborn and/or stupid to put him through to someone that mattered. If he persisted, eventually he'd get through to the right person who would reward him with a juicy contract. This same conversation was had at least once a week for the next month or two. He's desperate to let me set up a meeting. Besides, he says he can take us off the list once he's set up a meeting with a decision maker. Right, fine, sure, you can book a meeting for your reps, but I guarantee it will be a complete waste of their time. I scheduled them a meeting with the office manager me on a Friday afternoon when I'm the only one in the office, so I won't be too busy, and it'll be a diversion. The reps arrive. I show them into the office. They are clearly thinking we spend a lot on printing because we have so many printers, and I gave a rough idea of how much we get through in the office. They give me their enthusiastic spiel about all the advantages, focusing on the costs. They want to sit down with the figures and see what they can save us. Do I know what we spend at the moment? Paraphrased conversation. Me, not completely sure. Think it's around £100, 200 a year. Rep. Nah, it'll be a lot more than that with the amount of printing you do. Is that just the paper? Me, no, that's just ink and toner. Rep. Looks skeptical. Well, there's the paper too. Me, to be honest, we mostly cut down leftover paper from the factory, or sometimes suppliers give us a few cases for free. Rep. Okay, right. So what about the initial costs of the machines? If you average it out over the lifetime of prints, rather than considering it just as capital expenditure, it can make up a significant portion of your printing costs. This photocopier, for example, it's a few years old now, and you're looking at about £12,000 to replace it with a similar spec machine. So with our service, you can avoid that capital expense. Me, the owner buys them broken and repairs them. Most of the printers only cost a few quid, except the photocopier, which I think cost us £700 as even broken. They are expensive, and it took 3 broken ones to make that one working one. Rep, right? So when you need to replace it. Me, I hazard to guess he'll do exactly the same again. Rep. And the ongoing maintenance costs. Me facepalm. Rep. Then there's the costs and lost productivity of downtime to consider. He is trailing off at this point. It's clearly part of his rehearsed spiel, but he can also see downtime isn't an issue when we bizarrely have more printers than computers. Rep. There's absolutely no point in us being here, is there? Me, no, I'm afraid not. That was repeatedly explained to the guy who set up the meeting. But he said your company won't stop cold calling until we agreed to a meeting. So here you are. The reps agree it is a complete waste of time, have a bit of a frustrated laugh about the call center, and say it's not the first time they've been sent to completely pointless meetings because the call center folks get their commission based on the quantity, not quality, of the meetings they set up. They don't bother giving me their quote. I never heard from the company again. Story 3. In my early 20s, I worked at a Burger King in a college town. This place did well, but it was in an old crappy building that couldn't be altered due to local government issues. As a result, we had a lot of managers who would be there for a bit and then promoted to better places. I was good at my job, to the point where I was unofficially in charge of shifts and training new people. Note that I was still bottom of the ladder officially, which will be important later. Being a college town, people are poor and don't buy expensive things. On top of that, you had commuters who would snag a quick bite on their way home. So a smart person knows that the corporate guidelines for what to have on hand are useless and only get you in trouble. We got a new manager, Mike. Mike is a bit of a control freak and is overcompensating for his height. He was short. It's his first evening shift, and I am trying to explain the corporate guidelines are a bad idea. He doesn't like this, and being a young man, I am getting a little bit angry. Finally, he pulls the manager card and tells me to follow the guidelines. I pause, look him in the eye, and say, "Okay, I'll do what you say because you're the manager, but you're not going to have the food you need. Wait time is going to go nuts, and it's going to be miserable. After we do that for a bit, I'm going to do it my way and pull you out of the fire." Dead silence in the kitchen. A few of the more experienced people ask me if that is really what we are going to do. I confirm, and more than a few people are nervous, but also amused. Cut to a couple of hours later. Our parking lot is filled with people waiting, as is our lobby. On top of that, our drive-through time is at almost 10 minutes. I think our district manager might have even called in because he watched his places like a hawk. True to my word, I told people we were done and to do it the right way. We get everything under control and end the night fairly well. Mike and I discussed what happened, which boiled down to that he should trust our judgment, and he was with us for 6 months. He still pulled rank, but at least he respected the people who did the job. Story 4. My parents had this problem with a guy parking a tractor trailer on their land. He lives right across from one of their pecan groves. The grove has well-spaced trees all in neat rows. The grass is mowed super short, and the ground is really flat. It looks like an ideal place to pull your rig if you don't know better. The ground is so flat because they use mechanical harvesting. Bumps and grooves can cause the machines to leave pecans lying on the ground. A 2-inch deep groove from a big truck like that can hold thousands of dollars of pecans and will until it is fixed. Oh, and you have to get them up by hand. It's a big deal when someone messes with your livelihood like that. So the guy parks there one time. They get it. He probably doesn't understand he is causing so much trouble. Dad goes down, explains the damage he has done, tells him the grove is private property, and not to do it again. Dude, we'll call him Dude, agrees, apologizes. Dad goes home, fixes damage midweek. Next Friday, there is the truck again, same spot. Dad, not about to put up with this, calls the sheriff's department. A cop comes, the truck moves. Dad fixes damage midweek. Next week, no truck. 1 week later, the truck is back. Repeat complaint for trespassing to the sheriff. Dude claims he forgot. He drives over the road, and his Home Depot where his car is parked is 30 miles away. It is convenient for Dude to forget because he saves his gas and time by driving his employer's rig and parking it on my parents' land. Also, he doesn't get nailed if his cab isn't clean. No other driver gets assigned his truck. There are plain motivations. Dude clearly does not forget every time. He is home, but this is what he claims to the deputies sent out on the complaints. After 7 times, the sheriff's department is called. He finally gets a trespassing citation. No fine is levied. He drives his car 2 weeks in a row. The following week, the truck is back. At this point, my dad has fixed this damage so often he is keeping a tractor and blade on the property so it gets done faster and easier. He calls the sheriff yet again. The sheriff himself comes out this time. The truck leaves, and the sheriff comes to see my dad. He says the enforcement problem is that it is hard to explain to a court the harm when pictures hardly show any damage, and Dude always apologizes and moves the truck when deputies come. He says getting Dude for trespassing under those circumstances is going to be tough, but he is on this and will see it through for my parents. But his office is 30 miles away, not that many deputies to be out patrolling, etc. And then the sheriff, bless his little elected heart, says, but if there was something different like a theft of services going on. Cue malicious compliance. The next day, signs go up on 80 trees in a row 8,000 feet. They are 100 feet apart. Semi-parking? $500/hour. Per pay. Violators will be towed. Dude doesn't pay the signs any mind. Dude does, however, pay the tow truck and deputy quite a bit of mind. He comes running and screaming, waving his arms as they are hooking up. Well, before my dad called to have him towed, everything was documented, including having the sheriff himself drive by and take several pictures of the truck parked with the clearly visible signs. Everything is put on hold while Dude's employer, who owns the truck, drives out. After 3 hours, Dude's boss gives up and writes a check for $7,800 to cover parking and tow truck fees. That actually covered the tow truck, all the repairs, printing the signs, and beverages for about a year for my dad's Tuesday poker gathering. Cheers. Dude, who still lives there, does not park in the Pecan Grove. His boss's payroll deducted his checks for 2 years. Yes, my dad is awesome. Story 5. Cleaning out my home office today, and I stumbled across paperwork I had saved for whatever reason from a crappy call center job I worked at 15 years ago. This was an outbound sales thing, and it was non-stop calls all day. Needless to say, the job was terrible. With the constant talking though, your voice would start cracking throughout the day if you didn't hydrate. So I would bring jugs of water to sip on all day long. This, of course, meant frequent trips to the restroom. I never abused these trips, and they were always 3 minutes or less. But of course, this wasn't good enough for management. Oh no. One day, my manager demanded I get a doctor's note if I wanted to use the restroom at any time other than one of my 2 regularly scheduled breaks. I could tell she was convinced I would not do it. I scheduled the appointment and filled the doctor in, who thought it was hilarious that this manager, either one didn't understand biology or 2 was on a huge power trip. He provided me with the most condescending doctor's note ever, and it goes like this. To whom it may concern, This letter concerns my patient. My patient requires a lot of fluids while talking on the phone in order to avoid drying out and becoming hoarse. When he drinks this much fluid, he must urinate every 60-90 minutes. Please excuse these brief visits to the bathroom as they are unavoidable. Needless to say, she was not happy. My coworkers, though, all made trips to the same doctor and got similar notes. Pretty sure I wore a smug grin every time I walked to the bathroom after that. Story 6. This happened only a month ago, so the memory of the incident is fresh. I got accepted into college and had to quit my job of 2 years. I put up my resignation papers and had 2 months of notice period left. I had informed my manager and team but didn't account for Mr. S, who was technically on my team but worked from the client offices overseas, so I didn't get to see him ever. Background on Mr. S. He was hired as a mediator between the client and us, but had years of technical experience. So he often helped us out with the technical work, but was always a snob about it. He made sure to carbon copy every possible manager in every mail to show that he was doing a lot more than his role was required to do. Everyone hated how commanding and rude he was. Most meetings with him were just the entire team listening to him complain and moan for 20 minutes. He had no boundaries and would call up at odd hours of the night just to prove his point. He would promise clients certain results with unreasonable timelines without consulting the team, leading to late delivery and terrible client ratings. Since I had 2 months left to go at work, I wasn't quick to give up responsibilities and transfer knowledge to my colleagues. I handled an important client-facing task, and I've been doing it for the 2 years I worked there. I never taught it to anyone else because it was a relatively easy task, and it hasn't been messed up in 2 years. We got info from the client that my task was undergoing major upgrades and needed to be done extra carefully and on priority for the next week. I know the drill and get to work as usual. Mr. S calls me up on Skype to re-emphasize the importance of the task this week. I just replied to him that I've been following all protocols every week and will continue the same as usual, being careful of the upgrades. He considers my answer as unprofessional and inconsiderate, and proceeds to tell me how I'm not that important to the team, and my job was easily replaceable. He then cut the call and proceeded to reassign all my tasks for the next 2 months to someone else, while also formally emailing everybody that no new tasks were to be assigned to me. There I sat, maliciously complying, watching my teammates struggle to run my task, unable to help. I sat around doing nothing for the last 2 months of my job. Luckily, I was working from home, so that meant 2 months of paid leave.